Good morning. It is Sunday, October. I know it's October. I said September last time. It's October 13th at 6:30 in the morning. My name is Larry Cedar, and I'm back with you for another session on what I call scanning, spelled Sqanning. It's a made-up word. Scanning, by my definition, is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. That's all we're doing. Hang on, I want to adjust something really quick here. There we go. Okay. So that's all we're doing today is incrementally releasing muscular tension. Squeeze your hands together, 3, 2, 1, release. That's all we're doing. That feeling, we're going to get right to it. That feeling of release. Make a fist, 3, 2, 1, release. Make a face, 3, 2, 1, release. That feeling of muscular release is scanning. And through practice and through a accumulation of muscular release throughout your body, you can achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. It's the only form of self-help I practice. It's the only form of self-help I have practiced for years, because the more I practice it, the more I feel the benefits and the more convinced I am of the power of the technique. Not because of anything I've done. I didn't really invent this. It's just a variation on themes you've probably heard a million times in other self-help techniques, but I've distilled it down to this particular approach for me, and hopefully it works for you. So again, I always start briefly with the source of this technique. A man named Thaddeus Golas, Golas, wrote a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, in which he basically broke the universe, the entire universe, down into two fundamental forces of contraction, squeeze your hands together, and forces of expansion, release. And through that prism, through that template, if you begin to look at the world as in a state of contraction or expansion, you can begin to more deeply understand what's going on. It seems to make sense of things. You certainly can't control what state anybody or other being is in, but you can control your own state of being. And if you believe that the world is interconnected, that everything is on some level interconnected, then your steps towards expansion can perhaps help others and the world. So it's a very positive force. And when I say expansion, because that's what we're going to work on here is expansion. We tend to contract. It's the stuff of life. It's how we get things done. It's how we make words, how we make buildings, how we write screenplays and books and novels. It's how we, compose symphonies. It's how we play the piano. These are contractions. So we spend a lot of time contracting. So what we begin to find is when we are overly contracted, if you look at it as a continuum, contraction, expansion, when we're overly contracted, we are out of balance and we start to feel bad, confused, stifled, fearful, resistant, uncomprehending. And that's when we feel an instinctive need to expand, which can take a million different forms. As I've always said, there are chemical expansions, which are alcohol or drugs. They can help you expand and momentarily make you feel better, more balanced, contraction, expansion, center. But there are more natural methods which haven't got the side effects and which can sustain you through life without physically damaging you or your relationships or your life. So that's where I came up with this technique for me. So what we're going to do today is we're going to practice expanding. If we are overly contracted, we want to bring ourselves into balance or center. And we're going to start by taking a deep breath and sitting in absolute stillness and silence. This is a way of jump-starting the expansive process. Deep breaths are expansive by nature. Stillness is expansive because it's the opposite of action or doing. Silence is expansive because it's the opposite of speech or words, which are contractions. So we're going to stop the contractive process and move ourselves back immediately with a deep breath and stillness and silence. So here we go. Deep breath, stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Here we go. Deep breath. So in taking this preliminary step, we've already broken the contractive cycle. If you've ever noticed sometimes when you're upset or you're worried or you're working on something so hard and it starts to spin out of control, like the more you think, the more you think. The more you worry, and you keep trying to think more to stop it, to get yourself out of it, but then you've contracted even more. That's a cycle of contraction, which is very difficult to break because it builds momentum. And because contraction loves contraction, the more you give it, the more it wants. By taking a deep breath and sitting in stillness and silence, you have stopped that cycle. You may not be moving backwards into expansion yet, but you have broken the pattern. You have stopped. That's why I always say to anyone who comes up to me and says, I'm very stressed, I'm thinking about this and that and this and that, what do I do, what do I do? And I always say, stop talking, take a deep breath, and sit in stillness and silence for a minute, 2, 3, whatever. Break the cycle. If a wheel is turning this way, stop it. Once it's stopped, you can start reversing it, which is the expansion, the muscular release, which we'll get into. So let's do that again. Deep breath, followed by stillness and silence. Very important that you not move a muscle because that sends a signal, very clear signal to your body, your mind, your spirit. We have stopped doing anything. Doing is contractive. We've stopped. You have it within your power. That's the beauty of this technique. We think sometimes when we're spinning out of control, when we're contracted, we can't stop. I can't stop. I can't stop thinking. I can't stop. Well, you do. You do have the power to stop physically. This is why the muscles are so valuable and why I use them in this technique, because you can control aspects of yourself which will influence your very being. And one of them is to sit in absolute stillness, but continuing to breathe. Don't hold your breath. Release, but freeze. Deep breath, stillness, and silence. Here we go. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. Now, people have said to me, it's very difficult to sit completely still and continue to breathe, because part of you is saying, don't move a muscle, and part of you is saying, but continue to breathe and be loose. It is tricky. But just like certain ingredients in a recipe make for a perfect dish, they enhance each other. So too with breathing and stillness. So it's tricky to master, but you will get it. It's the perfect combination, stillness, silence, and breath, to bring you into an expanded state. It's the perfect combination. All three of them are expansive by nature, but it's trying to like pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time. It seems a little strange, but with practice. In fact, I would recommend that if you do nothing else in the first, let's say, few days or weeks of your practicing this technique, if you decide to practice it, to spend time on just that, taking a deep breath, stillness and silence while continuing to breathe. That is a fundamental first step to scanning. It will get you off to a good start. So again, all we're doing is moving the continuum from contraction to expansion. You can't contract and expand at the same time. So any movement towards expansion moves you into a more expanded, relaxed, open, peaceful, quiet, calm, clear state. You can't squeeze your hands together and release them at the same time. So all we're doing is infusing ourselves with small amounts of expansion. We've begun to move the dial. You might check in and see how you feel different after, 5-10 minutes of this session. How do I feel different? For me, things always get quieter and more still. Note those differences. That's the direction you're heading in. Let's do it one more time. Deep breath, stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. Another aspect of this technique is getting comfortable with stillness and silence. Silence in particular. If you think about it, part of the reason we're so invested in the internet, social media, our phones, is because it's an activity. It's something to keep feeding us whatever stimulation we need. Part of us is fearful of stillness, silence, if you will, nothingness. Because when you've dropped all of the contractions you've built around yourself, your social media, your identity, your name, your career, your money, your jobs, your possessions, your politics, your religion, when you have this structure that you've built around you, because it's all contrivances, none of it existed until you applied them to yourself. If you drop them all, and that's what happens in stillness and silence, what you're left with is just yourself, your being. In the purest sense, you don't even have a name or an identity or a purpose. You just exist. That can be a frightening thought, because how can you survive in this world without all these things you've built up to protect yourself, to earn money, to maintain relationships, to pay for your rent or your mortgage? How can you exist? Well, in truth, you can't. You do need all those things, but you can for a moment let them all go. But we're so used to being attached to these structures as a means of survival that instinctively we fear that if we let them all go, we will die. I mean, in an existential sense, what will we be without them? We will perish. So part of scanning is getting used to the feeling of nothingness. Breath, stillness, silence is nothingness. If you feel uncomfortable in silence or stillness, as I do, I will admit that it's challenging for me. It's because of the habits you've built up over all the years. And you do need all those things. You do. Those habits are good habits. I get up in the morning, I go to work. That's a good habit. But they can become constriction when you become overly contracted. So the practice of scanning is finding moments, islands, if you will, of stillness and silence, of nothingness to balance yourself. That's all we're doing. We don't want to become nothing, but we want to visit that place now and then so that we have equal amounts of both contraction and expansion, and we feel comfortable in our own skin, is the expression, being nothing, so we don't have to live in constant fear of losing everything. We begin to see that I'm perfectly fine with nothing, and it feels wonderful, because then you are at your most pure self. You are, the expression is, in touch with yourself. That's the cliche. You have, in fact, become in touch with yourself. When you feel that, it's wonderful, it's empowering, it's calming, because at root, you're fine without anything. So it's a good place to visit at least a couple of times a day. So that's the preliminary phase of scanning. That's the introductory phase, if you will, the warm-up, if you will. We begin to nudge the dial, move from contraction to expansion towards center. So now we go into what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique, which is the actual, as I said earlier on, incremental release of muscular tension. That's all it is. Squeeze your hands together, and 3, 2, 1, release. Ah. And say that. 3, 2, 1, release. Ah. That's scanning. That is scanning, as defined by me. The incremental release of muscular tension. The muscles are the perfect guide to bring us into an expanded state. Because muscles can only do one of two things: contract, make a fist, or expand, release. Can't do both at the same time. We have control of our musculature to a degree, in some areas of our body more than others, but to the degree that you can release muscular tension, you have in fact moved yourself into a more expanded state. Incremental, because even the smallest release moves the dial. And it's very important that you acknowledge that in beginning to practice this, because you will face great frustration if you insist on having complete relaxation and release. The body is habitually contracted. It takes a lot of gentle persuasion to get it to release and relax. Be patient with yourself. Take time. I move through these points of practice very quickly for instructional purposes, but on your own, take time. Take time. And acknowledge, very important, that you acknowledge and feel and say, yes, I felt that, even the smallest amount of release. Squeeze your hands together, 3, 2, 1, let them go. That's it. You just scanned. Take a deep breath. You just scanned. Sit in stillness and silence. You just scanned. So very important, the word incremental is very important. So we're going to begin to move through the body and incrementally release muscular tension. It is cumulative. You're moving the dial until at one point you will, as I say, pass over to the other side and your body will completely release and you will experience what it feels like to feel complete relaxation and release, and you will say, I need to come back to this again, and you're going to want to do it every day as I do. It's very healing and it brings you into balance. We're going to start with zone 1, the face. On my count, I want you to release as much muscular tension as you can in your face. If it helps to look in the mirror, you can actually see the change. 3, 2, 1, and release. You ever seen a hypnotist do his act? And he goes up to people and says, on my count, you're going to completely fall asleep. 3, 2, 1, and they just drop. And what he's done is he has powerfully suggested to suggestible people that they turn off the power to their muscles, that they stop trying, that they go into a state of pure release. At that point, they are very susceptible to suggestion, and that's why hypnotists can do what they do. So that's all you're doing. On the snap, you are turning off the power to the musculature. You don't have to snap, but just that's that moment when you feel where your face is at, structurally, muscularly, and you decide to release tension. 3, 2, 1, and release. That feeling is scanning. That release will take you into an expanded state. That expanded state will give you peace, clarity, calm. It will allow you to navigate through life without resistance because you will be more accepting of what is. That doesn't mean you want to let anyone take advantage of you or not get out of dangerous circumstances, but you will see them all more clearly and you will be able to more effectively negotiate them. So we're going to move through the body. The face again, 3, 2, 1, and release. Feel that sagging feeling, that scanning. Deep breath. You will see me take deep breaths throughout this process because the body is now realizing it's allowed to breathe. When you feel panic, it tends to be because you have started holding your breath. You're not getting enough oxygen. Your body literally feels like it's dying, like you're underwater and can't get to the surface. And that creates a panic. So as your body starts to relax and see that it has permission to breathe, take those breaths. Take those breaths. Zone 2, the top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. You may feel the brow release. You may feel the ears sort of drop. Again, the top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, to become an expert in scanning is to become a connoisseur of the sensations of your own body, to be able to feel and experience what's going on in specifically the musculature of your body. We're not dealing with the mind at all. You will find that over the course of a session, your mind will begin to relax, because if you think of the mind as a muscle in itself, holding on tightly to thoughts, worries, concerns, fears, anxieties, plans, as you begin to release some muscles, other muscles will follow suit, as will your mind begin to relax, loosen the grip on those thoughts and feelings, and float away, and you'll be left in a state of clarity. And if you find yourself thinking, I can't stop thinking about that, then I'll lose control of it. It's the opposite. It's when you let go of it that you gain total control, because then you are seeing it clearly, calmly. So don't be afraid to let go of thoughts. I mean, you're going to feel afraid. I always do. But let that happen. Zone 2, the top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. Moving quickly into the zone 3, the back of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, taking time to see, what did that feel like? How do I feel? Scanning is very much a feeling process. Feelings are what get trapped inside of you when you are contracted. You have a tight grip on them out of fear of control, loss of control, discomfort with emotion. So as you begin to expand, you begin to feel muscularly different. You begin to feel emotionally different. Take those breaths, feel that emotion, let it flow through you and out of you, and continue to expand. Zone 4, the neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, the neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. Again, I'm going to emphasize repeatedly in this session, that feeling of release is scanning. That feeling of release is scanning. Zone 5, the shoulders closely related to the neck. Sometimes when you release the musculature in the neck, you'll feel the shoulders drop. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. Quickly through all the first 5 zones. The face, 3, 2, 1, and release. The top of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. The back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. The neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. The shoulders, let them drop. 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. There's a part of the brain which is always saying, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? That's the contractive part of your brain, trying to make sense, trying to pull together a definition or an explanation for what is. As you begin to expand, you'll begin to realize or begin to feel like it doesn't matter what any of it means. How does it feel? So if, like myself, in the scanning process, you find your mind questioning, resisting, that's the contractive mind. Nothing wrong with that. We must constantly, in life, analyze situations, ideas, assess them, make sense of them, manipulate them as we see fit, put them to good use. We're breaking that cycle, moving into an expanded mind, which doesn't need to make sense of anything. So you'll feel yourself at war with yourself. I do. When I'm practicing scanning, I feel my mind arguing with my body, arguing with my feelings. Don't get mad at your mind. It's doing its job. But listen to it and say, I'm going to let that go. And continue to expand, continue muscular release until that voice, that contractive voice in your mind gets quieter and quieter and quieter and ultimately floats away, and you're left with an unquestioning mind, a mind that accepts whatever is. Zone 6 is down the chest, stomach, front of the waist, the plate of armor. Feel what that feels like. And on my count, let it release, incremental release, 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the chest, stomach, front of the waist, 3, 2, 1, and release. If you have had a massage or been to a chiropractor or who had any healer of any sort touch your body, you may be like me, you're very jumpy. The minute someone touches you, you jump. Okay? So when you're in a contracted state, you are very resistant to touch. You are very resistant to allowing your body to be accessible. And I always say 2 contracted beings, fists will slam up against each other. 2 expanded beings can merge. So when you are in the presence of a masseuse or a chiropractor or a healer, if you're like this and they're like this, you'll just try to get away from it. But if you relax, then you can merge and allow them to help you. So if you feel resistant to letting your body feel, to expansion, that's natural, it's protective. Incrementally release it, let it go, and eventually it will trust that it can survive the relaxed open state. You're having a little discussion with your body. It's arguing with you that it doesn't want to let go, and you're saying, maybe you do. Chest, stomach, front of the waist, 3, 2, 1, and release. Zone 7 is down the back, past the waist, and into the pelvis, 3, 2, 1, and release. When I say the pelvis, sometimes people say the pelvis. How do you relax the pelvis? Well, what I mean is the region of the pelvis, which includes the areas of sexuality and waste elimination, as I call it. Very sensitive, possibly embarrassing areas. They are connected with urges, desires, feelings, sometimes that we feel like we can't control or could potentially embarrass us. So there's a lot of fear involved in the pelvic region, naturally. And so we tend to hold, to control there. So whatever's associated in the pelvic region is what you want to let go of. And I always think of it as an unclenching of sorts. If it feels uncomfortable, that's okay. You're only going to release a little bit, incremental. The pelvis, 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the pelvis, 3, 2, 1, and release. One more time, the pelvis, 3, 2, 1, and release. I am, and you may also be surprised at how much muscular tension you hold even when you're just sitting watching TV or lying in bed trying to go to sleep or waking up in the morning. It's astounding to me. when I begin to scan, I'm frequently shocked at how much muscular tension I have. So be kind to yourself, forgive yourself, gently persuade yourself to release that tension. And I've been doing this for years. And still, when I start, I go, wow, how did I get to that place? But it's natural. In the course of our day, we must achieve, we must do, we must survive. And that's through contraction, doing, speaking, working, building. That's what we spend 90% of our day doing. So it's natural that you would have accumulated a great deal of muscular tension over the course of a day, a week, a month, a life. I have a theory through years of practice that it is part of the aging process, this contraction, and that we become more and more progressively contracted as we age out of fear, out of a need to protect ourselves, out of an accumulation of ideas, philosophies. You know how they say older people are rigid in their thinking? Well, it makes sense because they've accumulated ideas, they feel work for them in order to survive, and they don't want to let them go. The older they get, the more frightened they get, the more tightly they hold on to these ideas, these thoughts, these feelings. And that, in fact, restricts you, makes you rigid, makes you appear and act more aged. So scanning can be a fountain of youth, in effect, because if you begin to balance your life and begin to balance your life of contraction with expansion, you don't have to become so rigid. You don't have to become so muscular tight. Your thinking doesn't have to be so rigid and unilateral. You can be open to new ideas. So if you are an adult who's moving into his older years, or even a young person who feels like they've become too restricted in their thinking or body, scanning can help balance that. And in effect, keep you youthful because you are available, as youth are. They are open to ideas. They are more flexible because they haven't become so contracted, which can happen over the course of a life. 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, you've built up a lot of contraction. So expansion can counter that. Moving from the pelvis into the final zone, down the legs, across the knees, and into the feet. 3, 2, 1, and release. And if you don't know how to feel your feet, if you don't know how to relax the muscles in a certain area, that's okay. Work with the muscles that you can manipulate. Work with the muscles like the face, which you can just look in the mirror and see it happen. 3, 2, 1, and release. Squeeze your hands together. 3, 2, 1, release. Work on the areas that you're very familiar with. If I was to say to you, which part of your body do you think you can most easily release the musculature of? You might say, well, I can drop my shoulders. Some people might say, I can't drop my shoulders. No. That's where I hold all my tension. That's where I keep my safety. Some people could say, well, I can release this. 3, 2, 1, release. Do that for a while. If you're just starting off with this technique, start with what you know. What's most important in scanning is not how much you release. The more the better, of course. But it's that you begin to understand what it feels like. You become a connoisseur of muscular release. The practice of scanning is not the how much, it's the understanding of and the how. And I'm convinced, I've been doing this several years, but I'll be doing it the rest of my life. I'll never perfect it. I'll always be up against my own contractive habits and my day, my life. But I can get better and better at understanding how to release muscular tension, how to move into an expanded state. And I use that as a tool when I'm in, as I call it, trouble, when I'm overly contracted, when I feel bad, physically, mentally, emotionally restricted. I can call upon scanning to pull me out of trouble. And it's a continuum we all travel on. And you can look around you at your friends, your family, strangers, and see how are they dealing with their overly contracted state. And there's a million solutions. I always say, if you want a chemical solution, have a scotch or a whiskey or smoke a joint. Those are chemical solutions. And obviously they work to a degree because people are drawn to them. They will forcibly, chemically force your body to relax. But there are drawbacks, which we all well know. Side effects, addictions, things like that. So ultimately they're not constructive, they're harmful. So what you want, what you hope for, is a natural way to bring yourself to center, to expand, to bring yourself back into balance, a natural way, okay? And many of us feel like we have to have a drink or smoke a joint or whatever because we just don't feel we have it within us. We don't have the skills, we don't have the ability to help ourselves. We look for external help. And so many of them are perfectly valid. Therapy, dancing, skiing, whatever you do, going to a music concert that makes you expand. And if you look at it, you'll begin to understand that when someone's having a good time, when they're happy, they're expanding. So anything like that works, and you'll pick the one that works for you. This one works for me. I can do it anywhere, anytime. When I go to sleep at night, when I wake up in the morning, I can be sitting at my desk. I can be sitting in my car. I don't need to travel anywhere to make it happen. I don't need to pay anyone to make it happen. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There are people that can help us very effectively expand. But this is something I needed to have always available to me at any time. And after several years of practice, I can guarantee you, for me, it works, and possibly for you. I do these sessions for anyone who's interested in experimenting with this technique. Take a deep breath. So it's been a half hour. I don't like to go more than a half an hour. Again, these sessions move fairly quickly. They're instructional by nature, just to familiarize you with and remind you of how the technique works. Take as much time as you like. Do it as frequently or infrequently as you like, but maybe begin to get it in your mind, an awareness that this technique exists and is available to you anytime, anywhere, free, simple, and effective. And practice. I keep a journal. I try to do an hour, maybe 2 a day. It can be in 15-minute, 5-minute, hour segments. But just try, maybe today, when you start to go to your phone to play that video game, or you start to go online to read the news, or you start to turn on the television, or all the things we do that we feel we need to do to help us feel better, which are actually contractive things. Try saying, just for 5 minutes, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to expand. I'm going to sit. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to sit in stillness and silence, and then perhaps, if I have the time or inclination, I'm going to begin to release incrementally muscular tension. See what it does for you. If it's scary, if it's frightening, if it's uncomfortable, join the club. Sqanning terrifies me because I have to stop doing what I was doing and actually feel. But it's worth it because ultimately I feel open, more relaxed, more calm, more centered, more able to effectively navigate my world. Sqanning, the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. It's just this 3, 2, 1 release. That's all it is. Okay? That's today's session, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.